It was an early November morning, the air crisp and dry, carrying the comforting scent of freshly baked bread from the corner shop. Clara Bennett clutched the paper bag tightly, trying to preserve the last bit of warmth from the loaf her mother had asked her to pick up. Her mother needed those ingredients to prepare breakfast at the cafe where she worked. Clara was late because she had stayed up all night studying. At her age, she divided her time between helping her family and pursuing her dream of becoming a nurse. The dark circles under her almond-shaped eyes betrayed the sleepless nights spent buried in anatomy textbooks. But the weariness couldn't dim the hope in her gaze. The traffic light turned red just as she glanced at her battered phone. 6:45 a.m. If she moved fast, she could still make it in time to help her mom with the morning shift. Without hesitation, Clara clutched the bag of bread to her chest and started crossing the street, the music in her ears forming a bubble that separated her from the world around her. She didn't see the black Mercedes making a sharp turn at the corner. She didn't hear the horn blare like a thunderclap tearing through the quiet morning. She didn't see the horror etched on the faces of bystanders as the scene unfolded in slow motion. But she felt the impact, not from the car. A body hurled into her from the right, pushing her hard onto the sidewalk. The bread bag flew from her hands, its golden slices scattering like confetti across the street. Clara hit the ground shoulder first, rolling a few times before stopping. The screech of tires tore through the air. The Mercedes skidded, leaving burnt rubber marks on the asphalt, and came to a halt just inches from the man who had saved her. "Oh my God," she screamed, yanking out her earbuds and scrambling toward the motionless man. He wore a suit likely worth more than her entire savings combined. His silver-streaked hair was now stained red where his head had hit the pavement. "Please, don't die," she whispered, her hands trembling as she searched for a pulse on his neck. "Please stay with me." His eyes fluttered open for a second, sharp, green, and soul-piercing. His lips moved, barely forming the words, Are you okay?" The question hit her like a slap. The man lying in blood and pain was worried about her. "Yes, I'm fine," Clara whispered, squeezing his hand. "Thanks to you. Please hang on." A faint smile crossed his lips before his eyes closed again. He'd be better if the one lying here was me. The crowd had started to gather. Someone shouted that an ambulance was on its way. The Mercedes driver, pale as a ghost, mumbled something about brake failure and blind spots. But Clara could only stare at the stranger's face, at the lines that hinted he used to smile a lot, and the gold ring gleaming on his left hand. There was a calm radiating from him, even in pain. The sound of sirens grew louder in the distance. Clara took off her jacket, the only new thing she owned, and placed it under his head to help stop the bleeding. "Does anyone know who he is?" she asked desperately, looking around at the crowd. "Someone must know who he is." A man in a suit, looking like he belonged to the same world as the one lying on the ground, stepped forward. "He's Daniel Whitmore," he said shakily, "chairman of Whitmore Holdings." The name hit Clara like lightning striking twice. Everyone in the city knew that name, tied to skyscrapers and million-dollar donations to hospitals. And now, that very man was lying in the street, bleeding, because he had saved her, a girl who couldn't even afford a new phone. The paramedics arrived in a storm of movement and urgent commands. Clara was pushed back as they surrounded Daniel, attaching monitors, fitting a neck brace, preparing the stretcher. "Miss, please come with us," one of the EMTs said, taking her arm. "I'm fine," she protested, her eyes never leaving Daniel as they lifted him onto the stretcher. "He pushed me out of the way. The car didn't even touch me." "Still, we need to document the incident, and your arm has a few abrasions." Clara barely felt the sting on her skin where it had scraped against the road. Her mind kept looping a single image, those green eyes asking if she was okay, that weak voice saying it was better that he had been hurt. In the ambulance, a medic gently cleaned the small wounds on her arm, while Clara stared at Daniel's unconscious face. The machines beside him beeped steadily, the only proof that life still coursed through his veins. "He's going to make it," the medic whispered, adjusting the IV line. He's strong. The head impact looked worse than it is, but the hospital will need to run more scans just in case. The hospital. Clara closed her eyes and thought of her mother, waiting for the bread that would never arrive, the stack of unpaid bills at the tiny cafe, and her own deferred dreams of becoming a nurse. All of it suddenly felt small, insignificant, compared to the life and sacrifice of this man. "We need your statement." A police officer approached with a notepad in hand. Clara answered robotically. Her name, age, address. Each response felt inadequate, too ordinary to reflect the gravity of what had just happened. "Can you describe what happened?" I wasn't paying attention," she whispered. "I had music on. I wasn't looking. It was my fault. He saved me. I was in a hurry, had my headphones on. I didn't see the car. He came out of nowhere and pushed me out of the street." The officer nodded and jotted notes, his face grave. "The driver says the brakes failed. We'll conduct a full investigation." But Clara barely heard him. Her mind kept replaying that moment, the music in her ears, the sudden impact, the flying bread, and above all, those green eyes looking at her with a concern she didn't deserve. At the hospital, Daniel was wheeled straight into the emergency room. Clara stood in the hallway, clutching her blood-stained jacket, feeling utterly lost. A nurse brought her a clipboard. "Are you Mr. Whitmore's family?" "No." The word caught in her throat. I'm the one who nearly got him killed." The nurse looked at her kindly. "People said he chose to do that. He saved you." "About why?" The question came from somewhere deep inside her. "He didn't know me. He owed me nothing. Why would he risk his life for a stranger?" "There are people like that," the nurse said softly, "kind enough to do the right thing without needing a reason." Clara sank into a chair in the waiting room, her legs finally giving out after hours of trembling. She pulled out her phone and called her mother. "Mom, I'm sorry. There was an accident. I'm at the hospital." The next few minutes were a blur of broken explanations and repeated assurances that she was okay. When the call ended, she realized tears had been silently streaming down her face. A doctor appeared, his expression serious but not worried. "Were you the one who accompanied Mr. Whitmore in the ambulance?" Clara stood up quickly. "Yes. How is he?" "He's stable. The head wound needed a few stitches and he has a fractured rib, but given the circumstances, it's miraculous it wasn't worse." "Can I see him?" Clara's voice was pleading. "He's sedated for now, and technically only family are allowed in." "Please!" Even Clara was surprised by the urgency in her own voice. "I just want to thank him, to let him know his sacrifice wasn't for nothing." The doctor's expression softened. After a moment of silence, he gave a small nod. 5 minutes, room 1003. The hallway leading to room 1003 felt like the longest walk Clara had ever taken. Each step brought her closer to the man who had changed her entire fate with a single act of courage. As she stepped into the room, the steady beeping of the heart monitor echoed like a fragile reminder of life. Daniel lay motionless, connected to an array of vital monitoring devices. White bandages wrapped around his head and bruises had already started turning a deep purplish blue across his face. Clara quietly approached the bed, carefully taking his hand. It was a strong, calloused hand, proof that even as a wealthy man, he was no stranger to work. "Thank you," she whispered, knowing he couldn't hear her yet. "I don't know why you did it, but thank you. My life now belongs to you." And as the first rays of morning light spilled through the hospital window, Clara made a silent promise to herself. She would live a life worthy of that sacrifice. She would find a way to repay this man with everything she had. The private hospital wing looked more like a luxury hotel. Clara subtly adjusted her simple dress, painfully aware she didn't belong in a place like this. 3 days had passed since the accident, and every morning she found a new excuse to return. To make sure Daniel was still alive, still breathing. "Excuse me, miss," said the receptionist, her voice polite but guarded. "This area is for Mr. Whitmore's family only." Clara clutched the canvas bag to her chest. A container of warm chicken soup nestled inside, made by her mother. Despite their modest means, her mother had insisted, "Any man who saves my daughter deserves something made from the heart." "I'm his niece," Clara said, the words catching in her throat. She wasn't used to lying, but her need to see him outweighed her need for honesty. The receptionist checked the list. "I don't see your name on the family registry." Clara swallowed hard. "I live abroad. I just arrived when I heard about the accident. Please, just a few minutes." Perhaps it was something in her eyes or the sincerity in her voice, but the receptionist sighed and lowered her tone. "Room 1003. But if anyone asks, I never saw you." Clara's heart pounded as she walked down the hall. Nurses passed her without question. She had begun to blend into this world. "Room 1003. The door was slightly ajar. Daniel lay in the bed, his face turned toward the morning sunlight streaming through the window. The monitors continued their rhythmic beeping. The bandages on his head were fewer than the last time she'd seen him. "Hi," she whispered as she stepped in. "It's me." She moved closer, studying his face. The bruises had started to fade, a sign his body was beginning to heal. A sleep medical monitor displayed his heart rate, numbers Clara was beginning to recognize thanks to her nursing studies. "I brought you soup," she murmured, placing the thermos on the bedside table. "My mom made it. She says chicken soup cures everything, though I'm sure you're used to far fancier meals." Her eyes rested on the gold ring still gleaming on Daniel's left hand. A wife. Why hadn't she seen her during the past few days? The news had once said he was widowed, but that ring, proof of a love once real, made Clara's chest tighten. "I should be studying right now," she said, with a faint, self-conscious smile, taking the seat beside the bed. "There's an anatomy exam next week. But I can't concentrate until I know you're okay." Her fingers hovered near his hand before pulling back. Who was she to touch him? The reason he lay here was her. "The doctors say you'll recover," she said quietly. "But the blow to your head was strong. Your brain needs time to heal. Time you should be spending running an empire, not lying here because of me." Tears welled up, hot and unrelenting. "Why? Why did you do it? I can't even afford your hospital bills, let alone repay your kindness." Footsteps echoed outside, voices approaching. Clara stood quickly, wiping her tears. "I'll come back tomorrow," she whispered, "and the day after that, and every day until you wake up so I can thank you in my own words." The following days became a ritual. Clara arrived early, often before her classes began. Each visit came with a new excuse. Sometimes she claimed to be his niece, other times a distant cousin, or an old family friend. Gradually, the nurses began to recognize her and let her pass without question, offering small, knowing smiles. Clara spoke to Daniel, even though he was still unconscious. She told him everything, about her dream of becoming a nurse, about her mother and the struggles at the cafe, the books she was halfway through, the victories and setbacks in her daily life. Sometimes she read aloud pieces from the financial news, figuring he might want to stay updated on the world he once ruled. Even now, lying still and silent. One morning, as she recounted her latest anatomy class, she noticed the faintest flutter of his eyelids. Clara held her breath. "Mr. Whitmore." She leaned in closer, her heart pounding. "Can you hear me?" His eyes slowly opened, those deep green eyes regaining focus, landing on her face. In that instant, the world seemed to stop. "Breathe, Angel," he whispered, his voice hoarse from disuse. Tears streamed down Clara's cheeks, hot and filled with relief. "You're awake. Oh my God, you're really awake." "I'll get a nurse." But before she could stand, Daniel's hand clutched hers, weak but firm. "Wait. Tell me your name. I need to know." "Clara," she whispered. "Clara Bennett." A faint smile appeared on his lips. "Clara. Fitting name. You're my dawn. You brought me back to the light." She shook her head, guilt pressing down on her chest. "No." I'm the reason you're here. If I hadn't been so careless. If you hadn't been careless, he interrupted, his voice steadier now, I wouldn't have had the chance to do the most meaningful thing in my life. But you're Daniel Whitmore. She choked on her words. You built an empire, created thousands of jobs, donated millions. I moved money from one place to another, he said with a soft smirk. Saving a life. That was real. Clara sobbed. Why aren't you angry at me? You should hate me. I'm the reason you got hurt. Daniel tried to sit up, wincing from the pain. Clara rushed to help, adjusting the pillow behind him. How could I hate you? He said, looking deeply into her eyes. You've been here every day. The nurses told me, when I drifted in and out, you were always there. She blushed. I just wanted to make sure you were okay. And you brought soup too, he nodded toward the thermos on the bedside table. The first real smell I've sensed in days. My mom made it, Clara mumbled. It's probably not what you're used to. Perfect, Daniel cut in, his gaze softening. Just like you. In that moment, something shifted between them. It was no longer just gratitude or guilt. It was something deeper, quieter, a connection neither could name. Mr. Whitmore? Daniel, he corrected her. After nearly dying together, I think we can skip the formalities. Clara laughed. Daniel, I should get the nurse, she said after a few seconds of silence. They need to know you're awake. Wait a little longer, he said, still holding her hand. First, you have to promise me something. Anything. Keep coming back. Not out of duty, not because of guilt, but because your voice has kept me tethered to this world. Clara felt something in her heart unfold. I promise. As she stepped out to call the nurse, the room quickly filled with doctors, machines, and a flurry of questions. Clara quietly slipped away, but just before turning the corner, she looked back. Daniel was still watching her, his eyes full of unspoken meaning. For the first time since the accident, Clara felt that maybe, just maybe, fate hadn't been cruel when it brought them together. Daniel recovered slowly but steadily. Clara still came every day, bringing soup, books, little stories, and a light no one else seemed capable of offering him. They had begun to laugh more. The touches between them had softened. Something fragile yet genuine had begun to grow. And then, as with many beautiful things in real life, the unwelcome arrived. A photo was leaked. Clara, leaving the hospital, her head slightly bowed, carrying her soup in a worn paperback. Daniel, smiling from his hospital bed as she left. The headline on a viral news site read, Billionaire Daniel Whitmore and the Mystery Young Woman, a romance born of accident? Public reaction exploded. How old is she? Clearly a gold digger. He must be desperate since his wife passed. Clara read those words while waiting in line to buy bread for her mother. Her vision blurred. Her chest tightened. She hadn't done anything wrong, yet the world condemned her for caring about someone. Deeply, she wanted to disappear. To stop going to the hospital, to avoid the pitiful looks from nurses and doctors. But Daniel already knew. When Clara entered his room, prepared to explain, he raised a hand and stopped her. I know, and I don't care. About they're your friends, your business partners, investors. No one gets to define my happiness but me. He looked straight into her eyes, voice calm but unwavering. Clara, if I have to trade my reputation to keep you, I will, without hesitation. She sat beside him, heart racing. The world outside may have been falling apart, but here, in this white-walled room, in the warmth of unjudging eyes, something sacred was taking root. 2 days after the media storm, Daniel requested his lawyer to visit the hospital. Clara assumed he wanted to issue a statement to the press, but the truth left her speechless. I want to create a scholarship foundation, Daniel said, eyes locked on hers. In my wife Helen's name. Clara sat frozen. She always wanted to help young people like you, those with dreams but no means. The lawyer placed a folder on the table. On the front page, The Helen Whitmore Foundation for Education and Renewal. Nominated Director, Clara Bennett. No, I'm not qualified. You have heart. You have empathy. And you know what it means to fight for a chance. Clara's eyes welled with tears. This wasn't just a gift. It was faith. A way for Daniel to show that his feelings weren't impulsive. They were built on recognizing her true worth. From that day on, public opinion began to soften. Their story shifted from scandal to inspiration. Hospital staff, once wary, now greeted her with warm smiles. In a quiet afternoon moment, Daniel took Clara's hand and whispered, "True love doesn't need defense, it needs conviction." She nodded. For the first time, there was no fear, no second-guessing, only trust, and a foundation laid not from wealth, but from belief and sacrifice. That night, Clara returned to the hospital later than usual. She didn't know why, only that something in her heart pulled her back. Daniel sat in the chair by the window, staring out into the darkness, as if listening to the whispers of the past. "I knew you'd come back," he said without turning. "I could feel it." Clara let out a soft laugh as she stepped closer. "I wasn't planning to, but I couldn't sleep." Neither could I. She sat beside him in silence. The room was bathed in dim light, the only sound the gentle rhythm of the heart monitor, like a slow lullaby. "I've been slowly dying since Helen left," Daniel began, voice low. "Work, accomplishments, it was all a shell. You make me feel alive again." Clara turned away, eyes shimmering. "I'm scared," she confessed. "Scared that these feelings are wrong, that we're wrong." Daniel turned to face her, his hand gently brushing hers. Real connection doesn't need years to grow. It needs truth. Silence followed. Not awkward, but deep. When Daniel lightly squeezed her hand, Clara didn't pull away. "I've never loved anyone," she whispered. "Neither have I," he smiled gently. "Not like this." And in that moment, no more words were needed. When their lips met, it wasn't blind passion. It was two souls merging after being lost in the noise of the world. Clara trembled, but she wasn't afraid. Daniel held her as if she were something sacred. No rush, no claiming. Every touch was a promise, every embrace a silent thank you. As they lay together on the narrow hospital bed, Clara pressed her ear to his chest, listening to his heartbeat, strong, truly alive. "Are you okay?" he whispered, fingers brushing her hair. "I feel whole," she answered, her lips brushing the skin over his heart. In that moment, there was no age, no status, just two people, once broken, now found. 3 weeks after his discharge, Daniel asked Clara to come with him one early morning. The car stopped at the exact corner, the place where they first met, where her life nearly ended, and where their love had begun. Clara stood still. "I remember every detail," Daniel said, taking her hand. "The paper bag, the fear in your eyes, and the instinct to protect you." She gripped his hand tightly, eyes stinging. "Why would you risk everything for a stranger?" Daniel smiled softly. "Because I read Helen's last letter. She wrote, 'If one day you find a reason to live again, don't let it go.'" He turned, pulling out a small velvet box. Standing on the very crosswalk where fate almost broke them apart, Daniel knelt down. "Clara Bennett," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. "In the place I almost lost you before I had you, I ask, will you let me spend the rest of my life protecting and loving you?" Clara burst into tears. The ring shimmered with a green sapphire, the exact shade of her eyes, framed by 2 delicate diamond wings, symbols of shelter and destiny. "Yes," she whispered, 1,000 times yes. Strangers applauded. Someone recorded the moment, but in that instant the world faded away, and only they remained. In the very spot where everything could have ended, they had found everything worth beginning.